Hello and welcome to the Are You Bored Yet podcast. I'm your host Harry, and on today's mini episode we are talking about the German Panzers. So then, the year is 1918. Germany has suffered a catastrophic defeat in the Great War, or World War One. The Royal Navy and the Triple Entente naval powers have blockaded Germany for the past 4 years. Its civilians are starving. The economy is in tatters, and the Kaiser Wilhelm II, has just been deposed. And now that sounds bad, but just fast forward a few months after the armistice, which was signed on November 11th, 1918 to 1919 during the Treaty of Versailles, Germany is stripped down even further, forced to pay huge sums of reparations towards the Allied powers. And even there was talks then that the reparations may be too extreme. However, the warnings were not heard. So, in 1919, something called the Spartacus Uprising happened. So, actually, I'm not going to get too involved in Weimar Republic, because this is another series I want to do on my own. So, obviously, you had the different coups. So, basically, Weimar Germany is in a catastrophic state. There was different putches or coups. You obviously had the famous beer hall putsch, the cap putsch done by the Freikorps, but I'll come back to that on a later series. But something was realised during the Great War. In 1916, the first major use of something called the tank was used at the Battle of the Somme, also known as land ships. So, throughout the war, different variants took place. So you had, obviously, the first one was in 1915, called Little Willie. Yes, that was the name of the tank. And then obviously you had the Mark series, obviously you had the famous Mark IV, Mark Vs. You had the French assault guns, the very rare German A7V. But later on in the war, you had a pioneering tank called the Renault FT-17, which was a light tank in all sense of things. It was the first tank to have a rotating turret. It could be fitted with different weaponry and stuff. And a German officer by the name Heinz Guderian recognised this. He understood the downfall of cavalry charges soon on into the war. As if you ever read his book, early on in the book, he demonstrates how brigades of German cavalry during the invasion of Belgium were wiped out. So he saw the pioneering use of the ability of tanks, and especially light tanks. And through the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was banned from having any tanks, but that did not actually stop them. They used tractors, armoured cars, dressed them up as tanks basically. They watched videos of the British training in Salisbury Plain to assist in their tank tactics, and they had some great generals. Obviously, you had the pioneering inventor of Blitzkrieg, Heinz Guderian. You had von Lundstedt, Erich von Manstein. You had a lot of good Panzer leaders. And throughout 1920s, and obviously the rise of the Nazis in 1933/1934, there was a deal cut with the Soviets, where the Soviets would produce tanks as long as the Germans would teach the Soviets different tank tactics. So let's get to the first major production Panzer that you had. The Panzer I, which was a light tank. It was fitted with dual machine guns, and the idea was it was to deal with infantry. It was fast paced, fast moving. It could get through infantry, get past infantry lines very quickly. And then there was some other ideas, like, apologise for this pronunciation, the Gross tractor, which was a heavy tank design, but never really. I do not believe it was produced. I'll put a correction on the screen if I'm wrong. I don't think it was produced. It was too costly, and by the time, like, obviously 1939 rolled round, it was just going to be a sitting target. But you had obviously other versions of the Panzer tank. You had the Panzer II, which was an upgraded version of the Panzer I. It had obviously the machine gun. It also had an autocannon on it. Correct yourself if I'm wrong with that, but it had a better bit of armament to assist itself. But another issue is, though, obviously the tanks are very light because it's designed for blitzkrieg, fast-paced manoeuvres, blitz through the immediate front line and get to the key communication infrastructure areas behind the lines. Obviously it had a lack of armour, which was an issue in Poland, which we'll come to soon. And then you obviously had different side variants. You had, as the years go on throughout the 1930s into the early 40s, you had the Stug 3, which was an assault gun. I think one of the best, actually it is the best assault gun in World War II, with the most confirmed tank-to-tank kills. You had vehicles such as the Greel, self-propelled artillery guns. You had all them variants, but into 1939/1940, new variants of the Panzers came out. The Panzer 3 and /4. They had more armour, better armament, so better gun, better cannon for dealing with other enemy tanks. But the issue is, in the 1939/1940, there is a lack of these tanks available for the German Reich, so they're still stuck with using the Panzer II and other variants of the Panzer II/Panzer I. So, however, though, in Poland, after the campaign, there needed to be some serious studying done because a quarter of the Panzers used were lost. Which is, obviously Poland fell in a few weeks, but still some catastrophic losses on the Germans. So a quarter of the Panzers, I believe half of the Luftwaffe used in the mission was lost as well. Lessons had to be learned for the invasion of France. And the pioneer of Blitzkrieg, Heinz Guderian, was up on the table for France. He realised many years ago the true extent of the use of Panzers. He sent Panzers through Luxembourg, which was thought to be an impossible area for tanks and other armoured vehicles. He blitzed through Luxembourg in only a few hours, got to the Sedan. The French thought it would take 3 weeks to reach Sedan. Nope, 3 days. And from there, it was basically the cards were written on the table for put up on the table for France. France was done. Allies encircled at Dunkirk. Then France fell in 6 weeks. But we discussed that in our Blitzkrieg video. You can watch that if you would like to. But going on to 1941 to 1943, you had different variants of tanks starting to get developed. You had the heavier Tiger 1 getting produced, probably one of the most famous tanks throughout World War II from the enemy side, well, from the Axis. Easily recognisable. You see it in all sorts of films. You got dodgy representations in like Saving Private Ryan. Saving Private Ryan is actually a good representation. And then you had an actual Tiger 1 used in the film Fury. That tank was developed and it became a very much a psychological weapon, just like the Stuka in the early years of the war, as a lot of allied armour and anti-tank guns couldn't actually penetrate its thick armour. I mentioned just before the Panzer III and Panzer IV, you had different variants of them getting produced. The Panzer IIIF, the Panzer IV variants, there's millions of different Panzer IV variants. I'll put one up on the screen, the G variant I believe, you can have a look at that one. So Tiger 1's produced, Tiger H1, yeah, different types of Tigers, the Tiger E as well. 1943 you had a new type of tank getting produced, the Panzer tank. Well, we'll go more specific, the Panzer D. You had the Panzer G variants, you had millions of them. So Panzer D was a pioneering tank of its time, considered to be the first main battle tank to be produced, and later on in the war it was fitted with night vision and all sorts, but we'll get to that. It was first used, I believe, in the Battle of Kursk, Operation Citadel, which we are going to discuss in our Hit the Strikes East episode, or one of the episodes after it. So Panzer was used in Operation Citadel, and if you know about Operation Citadel, the Germans, obviously there was a fair amount of casualties on both sides, but the Germans actually walked away from the battle. They lost it, but they had less casualties than the Soviets, and the Panzer tank performed quite well up in the Kursk salient. And into 1944, you had the Tiger II, or the Königstiger, King Tiger, whatever you want to call it, which was, I would like to say, a marvel of German engineering. However, a lot of issues with the Tiger 1 and Tiger 2, the transmission, the engine was catastrophic. During the Battle of the Bulge, it was said that a German Tiger tank would take 10 hours of maintenance just for it to work for 1 hour, whereas a Sherman tank could be working for 1 hour and would run for 10 hours. There's a lot of other sayings as well from from the Ardennes. The Tiger 1 was fitted with an 88mm cannon. I believe the Tiger 2 was as well. I'll put a correction on the screen. It was fitted with slanted armour compared to the sort of 90-degree angle armour you saw on the Tiger 1. You had angled armour on the Tiger 2 as well as the Panzer tanks to help deflect bullets. A lot of tanks were fitted with something called Zimmeret, which was an anti-magnetic substance attached to the sides of tanks to stop magnetic mines being attached to it, but it was a waste of money because the Germans spent a lot of money developing it, right? But they were the only ones that used magnetic mines. The Allies didn't use them. Fast forwarding on, obviously you have different variants throughout this war. You have different anti-tank, like assault guns, tank destroyers. You have the Jagdpanzer, the Jagdpanther, the Jagdpanther, I believe, known as the Hetzer. Great bit of kit to be using. I want to try to focus more on the sort of main tanks that were actually used though. Throughout Operation Barbarossa and the German invasion of Soviet Union, they captured a lot of tanks such as the KV-1, which they then obviously redeveloped into their own versions. Yeah, the T-34-54 I believe it is, put correction on my screen if I'm wrong, that they were converted into German Panzers as well. But nearing the end of the war, 1945, I believe that's about it for tank development. Obviously you see other versions like the prototypes of the Mouse tank. There's only ever 2 of them ever made. You had the Jagdtiger. There's a picture up on screen for you to have a look at, you'll know what I mean. There was only 18 of them that ever saw combat. One in 1944 I believe, yes, 1944, during the Warsaw Uprising, used to level Warsaw. And obviously as the Germans get pushed back in further into the Reich, especially on the Eastern Front, they start using the tanks as mobile, as static gun positions, because Germans don't have any fuel. They don't have enough fuel to be able to run entire Panzer armies and SS Panzer armies. So they obviously start to get bogged down a bit more. Get to the Battle of Berlin, you had quite a numerous amount of tanks that were just sat around, just shooting at any Soviet tank that would come down their street. And I think that about covers it. That's a brief overview yet again. If you want us to do a video on in-depth analysis of the sort of armaments that we use on these tanks, so if you want us to talk about assault guns, tank destroyers, just let us know in the comments. So thank you very much for watching. I've been your host Harry, and you've been watching the Are You Bored Yet podcast.
Cling to my baby, and she clings to me.